people who choose to be in government, choose to work in government, want to help people. That's like their number one goal. Mm-hmm. And what we try to do is get rid of all the things where they're not helping someone. We help them figure out ways to reduce the variation or reduce the waste in any process. And what we're trying to do is get them to do what they love most. Getting a police officer to serve and protect is what he or she wants to do every single day. And if I can reduce 20 minutes out of their laborious report writing process and our team can help them figure that out, then we're opening up an active patrol for 600 to 700 officers on a single day. And that has dramatic impact because that's what they want to do. That's what they chose to be police officers for. And our job is to help them be the best employee they possibly can be.
Welcome to the Just-in-Time Cafe GoLean6Sigma.com's official podcast, where we help you build your problem-solving muscles. We share best practices from over 20 years of success, helping organizations from the Fortune 500 to small and medium-sized business to government achieve their goals using Lean Six Sigma.
Hey Tracy, good morning.
Hey Elizabeth, how are you?
I am good. I'm good to see you back at the cafe, and I am psyched to hang out with you today.
Me too, and I so need a cup of coffee today. It's one of those days already.
Already, I'm with you. I think a large for me, if you wouldn't mind, and it's getting a little chilly, so maybe this one is hot as opposed to iced.
Sounds great. I think I'll get the same thing as you.
So we're not going to the rooftop today, but we're going to let's go to our little private room.
Okay, sounds great. See you in a minute.
See you in a minute.
So, Elizabeth, what do we have on the menu today?
I'm glad you asked, Tracy. First, for our appetizer, we're going to discover a tool to conduct great process walks that is probably within 2 inches of you right now. Next, we'll find out what paving city streets and fixing gun turrets have in common. For our tools of the trade, we'll talk about a book that bridged the gap between the Toyota production system and removing office waste. And then for our Q&A, we're going to discuss what is the difference between Lean and Six Sigma, and then what is the same. And then for today's special, we're going to find out about your interview with Brian Elms of Denver City.
That sounds awesome. I can't wait.
To start it off, we are going to look at this app, and did I mention that it was not an app, it's actually your cell phone?
No, you didn't. That was the big surprise.
Okay, so the reality is you and I have both dealt with this. We know process walks are one of the absolutely fundamental pieces to understanding a process, that you want people to walk it to truly understand it. And the best process walk is done in person, on site, and you move from point to point in a process and you conduct interviews. And that's the gold standard. But a lot of people come back to us and say, but we're not co-located. We're not in the same place. Or nobody is. Or we're nearby, but there's no travel budget. So we really can't conduct a process walk. And the reality is you could use your phone, right?
Absolutely. I think that's the beauty of living in today's world is they make it really easy to create a virtual environment. So we get that it's pretty challenging. People say, well, we can't really walk the process because we're in 2 different buildings or 3 or we're across the world, and we can't do that. And the beauty of your cell phone video or video chat is that you can actually conduct a process walk, and it can be really fun. So leverage that technology, and people can do join me, something like that for checking somebody's screen to see what they're actually doing on their computer. Because sometimes when you walk people through the process, they say, well, let me show you what I do on the computer. So you can view people's computers very easily. So I would say never see this as a barrier anymore. Physical separation is becoming closer and closer in terms of not being separated with virtual tools like our very simple 2 inches away cell phone video, as Elizabeth has said.
We have the technology, and it's not complicated.
Correct.
Great point, Tracy. Okay, so next up, let's see. Tracy is going to tell us about how it's going to be easier to drive in Washington State.
Yes, so this was a very interesting article that I read about with Washington State, and they're really trying to create some funding for street surfacing. And the original process wasn't very good because there was some money allocated, but unfortunately, that money wasn't enough to actually fix the streets. So that could be a problem when you only get a certain amount of money and it's really not conducive, or it's not enough funding to pay for those. So what they did was they basically created a new process for funding the right street with the right treatment at the right time. They call it the three rights, and it's basically the same money that is being distributed but used differently. So they got creative and they found ways to improve the streets using the budgets that they were given, but streamlining the process so that they could afford to do it. So that was really exciting. And I think, maintenance of streets can be very expensive. And it feels great to know that the government agency is really looking to maximize taxpayer dollars. So I thought that was a great article, a good read on how Washington and the maintenance group, the transportation and maintenance groups, are doing more with their money, doing more good, I guess we could say, with taxpayer dollars. So just wanted to share that. I really enjoyed reading about it.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, Elizabeth, what does paving the street of Washington have to do with gun turrets?
It's a tantalizing question, but it's based on the same exact idea. If you think about our military, they're also having to look at their budgets and doing more with less. So same question, and what they dealt with, and this was in Corpus Christi, it's a Army depot, and they won big Lean Six Sigma honors. They're part of the Pentagon's Hall of Heroes, which is very cool.
Nice.
Yeah, I liked it. And this is great news for safety and effectiveness of our armed forces. It's also great news for taxpayers, just like you described with the city streets. And I am hugely excited when I hear about Lean Six Sigma applied to government, since there are 325 million stakeholders. U.S. citizens all benefit from the work these guys did. And like any other Lean Six Sigma efforts, it was the people doing the work who made the improvements. It wasn't management dictating what to do. And Tracy, I cannot pretend to know a whole lot about gun turret flange repair process, right, on an Apache helicopter, but I know the Apache helicopter is integral. The Army uses it all the time, and they rely on it. And I understood the basic challenge. They said that when they had to repair the turrets, they had to remove several major components to repair the key piece. So the team worked out a way to bypass all of this waste of removal, right? Just getting all these things out of the way. So they found a way to bypass that. So they removed the waste of the time and effort to make the repairs, which made the aircraft was now Army, it's back in action faster, right? And they rely on it. Reduced their lead time to repair it by 78%, which is huge. They reduced the labor cost to repair it by 89%, which is huge. They reduced the defects from 57% to 10%, and I'm sure they're going to even do better next time. And they saved over $7 million for 3 years. And over 3 years, which is, again, amazing, big. What an incredible accomplishment. So there's so many complaints around government spending. You and I hear it all the time. So we have to applaud and support any Lean Six Sigma efforts across all levels of government, which both of us are doing here today. So 3 cheers for the team at the
hip,
Corpus
hip, hooray.
Christi. Yes, hip, hip, hooray for the Corpus Christi Army Depot. Well done. Well done.
Well done. Excellent job. That's always wonderful to hear such great strides in government and process improvement. And, I think, as we've said before, I think, complaining about our government has become a national pastime. And so it's always nice to hear stories about positive outcomes with process improvement, trying to make things better and making a difference.
So Tracy, tell us about the book that took us from the shop floor of Toyota to the office cubicle.
That sounds fine. I could do that. So this is a book. It's called Value Stream Management for the Lean Office by Don Tapping and Tom Shooker. And what I really like about this book is this was actually this is one of the first books I was introduced to related to applying lean in an office environment. So I found this book, and this was, I think the original was done in 2002. But I found this book and I just ate it up because a lot of where I work is in non-manufacturing environment, and I really wanted to find more help and more education around specific things that applied in a non-manufacturing environment that was lean related. And I know today that seems, well, everybody knows that it can apply. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people can see that there is a great deal of application with some of these lean tools in a non-manufacturing environment. But back 14 years ago, it wasn't very well known. And so I really liked this book because it was very simple, an easy read. I really liked how it was organized about the important pieces because it talks a little bit about culture and commitment to lean. And then it talks about mapping the current state, identifying lean metrics, and then mapping the future state, which is typically what happens in a Kaizen event from a lean perspective. At a high level, it's the same, but it really does focus on some of the tools that really can apply to non-manufacturing, like identifying customer demand, creating continuous flow, creating workload balancing and leveling so that employees feel like the work is spread out evenly, just like in a production environment, but in a non-manufacturing environment. So I really enjoyed the book. What did you like about it, Elizabeth?
I love how many examples they gave. I love that they had a detailed case study moving throughout the book. I like that it was good for beginners, but it's also good for people that had been to a few lean classes or were familiar with the terms and the processes. I also like that they gave you a CD-ROM full of worksheets, so there was no need to go hunting for how to do things. They really gave you everything you need. The other thing I enjoyed about this was that's the first time I heard about catchball and that technique of working between management and the shop floor, or in this case, the people working in the office, to really get clarity around why are we doing this, what's the goal, what's the mission in this particular project. And I think that kind of cross-pollination and clarity makes a huge difference. And I know you've had some really good successes with catchball. You recently just wrote about, didn't you?
I did, and I really enjoyed that. I really believe in the catchball idea and the concept, and it really is a different way to engage people. So I really have come to use that particular tool as a way to get employees to engage in activities that are lean related, and it seems to work really well. And the leaders tend to think that as well.
Yeah, no, it's a simple thing. Even just the name of it, catchball. It's clearly about receiving and pitching, and everybody gets that, and that's how simple it is. But it just doesn't always take place. So I think I appreciate it.
Yes, and I think the interesting thing about catchball, just to maybe say as my last comment about catchball, is it feels, you are giving up control to a degree, but you're doing it because you're involving others. So rather than, creating something and perfecting it before sharing it, the idea is that you share it before it's perfected, knowing that you're going to change it and take feedback of employees and what they think and make adjustments. And I think leaders have to be comfortable with that. And also employees have to feel comfortable with knowing that they're going to get something that's not completely and fully baked and it's not perfect. And know that that's the part of the process, because I think sometimes people think, oh, well, you're giving to me, it's not even ready. Well, of course, that's why we want you to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to have comfort with ambiguity if you're going to collaborate on something. It's not fully baked, as you say. I think that's a great point. That's a great point. Tracy, we've got a question today from one of our subscribers, and this is a fundamental one, but I find it's a good one. People come back to it again and again. What is the difference between Lean and Six Sigma?
Okay, so that is, yes, it's a real basic question. And I think that, there's a lot of information out there. And so why don't we just talk a little bit about it? I always say that Lean and Six Sigma both fall under what I would call the process improvement umbrella, also known as continuous improvement. So there's this overarching effort to improve processes. And Lean and Six Sigma both fall under that umbrella. They are both techniques or methodologies that organizations implement to try to improve processes or continuously improve. So they're both under that umbrella. And I really believe that both of these toolkits are important in improving processes, but there is a bit of a difference. So Lean focuses mostly on identifying waste and eliminating it. So that's one of the primary things about Lean is I know what the 8 wastes are, try to see them, which is, I think, sometimes the biggest challenge is people don't necessarily see the waste. So training people to see the waste is an effort. And then once people see the waste, then what are you going to do to minimize it, eliminate it, or streamline it? And so that is a huge focus of Lean, as well as how do you maximize flow of a process. So think about, I always think about sitting in like I think about Subway sandwiches, which is a chain here. And, think about flow of the person waiting in line for their sandwich and how would you maximize or optimize that? So flow is really about not having the thing or the person wait for the product. And at Subway, they do a pretty good job, but they could probably do a better job in some areas as well. So that's Lean. Is there anything you want to add about Lean, Elizabeth?
No, that's a really nice description. I like it.
Okay. And then for Six Sigma is really more around reducing variability and being more consistent in your process. So both of them help discover the root causes of why things aren't working the way that they should or why they're not working better. But Six Sigma really focuses on reducing variability. It's more statistical in nature. It's a bit more rigorous when it comes to applying some of the statistical applications. But ultimately, it's really identifying how do we be more consistent in our process. And it's funny because I could use fast food as the same example. We talk about McDonald's. We don't necessarily go to McDonald's because they have the best food in the world or the best hamburger in the world. We typically go there because, why? Because they have very consistent products and very consistent delivery of cycle time. We go there when we don't have time, right?
Yeah.
So it's not, they have 1 billion served because we're in a rush. We go there because we know what we're going to get. We know how long it's going to take. And we go there when we don't have time. It's sort of the default, let's just go to McDonald's because we really don't have time to go anywhere else. So I think it's really interesting when we think about why we go a certain place when we're in a rush. And because McDonald's has very low variability in their products and in their services. And that is a great example of having very consistent processes. And so that's really what Six Sigma does. So I hope that helps in terms of understanding the difference between Lean and Six Sigma.
And I would just add that those are the differences, but the reality is they have a lot more in common. And both of them are focused on just serving the customer, listening to the voice of the customer and understanding and meeting those customer requirements. And I think about the variability on the Six Sigma side of trying to reduce that. And I think about standard work on the Lean side, trying to make standard all work processes, which reduces variability. So they're very much in alignment, just two really companionable toolkits that we love using together, don't we, Tracy?
We absolutely do. And thanks for saying that, Elizabeth, because there's a lot of rumors out there, with people fighting over which is better, Lean or Six Sigma. And I really believe, and I think you do as well, Elizabeth, that they're both valuable and that they both can be taught as a process improvement toolkits because they work really well together. And it doesn't matter if a tool comes from Lean or Six Sigma. What really matters is, does it solve the problem?
Yeah.
So use the tool that solves the problem.
Yeah. Let me use all the tools. Give me all the tools and let me choose.
Exactly.
So Tracy, for
Yes.
today's special, tell us about your interview. What's coming up on today's special?
So we are going to be interviewing Brian Elms today, and Brian Elms is responsible for the Peak Performance Program at the City and County of Denver. And so they've really created an environment and a group to really help all agencies in Denver to improve their performance using process improvement. And he wrote a book, and it's a wonderful book. I got a chance to read it. I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend it. Some really funny stories in there about, one of the chapters is called Forget the Froyo. And that is because ultimately an agency, they had such long wait times that they decided to install a frozen yogurt machine in the weight room. And so he wrote, Forget the Froyo, let's fix the process. So I think, I really loved his approach and the story of, the I don't know what you want to call it. You're probably better at this than me, but I just liked his style of writing the book. And I think you'll enjoy it. So, and I think you'll enjoy his interview. He's a very engaging and dynamic person. So I think it'll be a great interview.
I'm looking forward to reading that book, and I'm looking forward to your interview. Thank you, Tracy.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Just in Time Cafe. I'm having a cup of coffee with Brian Elms today, the director of the Peak Academy at the City and County of Denver. Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Tracy, thank you so much for inviting me to the Just in Time Cafe. I feel like we're sitting around a great cup of coffee in a wonderful coffee shop in Denver. But that's really not the case. We're doing this over the interweb, which is even awesomer. And I've been in the City and County of Denver for about 9 years, and we've been running the Peak Academy for over 4. Mm-hmm. And the Peak Academy is a pretty awesome, innovative place that we created a few years ago. But overall, who am I? So I'm the director of the program. I've been with the city for 4 years working on the academy. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, I worked at the airport for 4 years and had the incredible experience of doing some process improvement with Denver Health, which is our local hospital system here. They had a big lean program at Denver Health and still do to this day, and sort of credit their lean program as saving money during the course of the recession. Mm-hmm. And when Mayor Hancock took over about 5 years ago, he wanted to set up a similar program, and we launched the Peak Academy here. Uh-huh. And my background is really in government and nonprofits, and I've worked from Washington, D.C. and Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I've worked in the Department of Aging in Pennsylvania. I worked at AARP in Washington, D.C., the airport here in Denver, and then found myself doing innovation and process improvement for the City and County of Denver, which has quite possibly been the coolest thing in my life.
Right.
I have a wonderful time doing it.
Well, what's really exciting, and I'm really excited to talk with you today, because I think there's a misnomer out there that government is sort of beyond help. And I think what you've done for the City and County of Denver, especially with the Peak Academy, is sort of showing that there is really good work happening in government. And that's really exciting. And I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about it. So I have some statistics on the Peak Academy that I want to share with our audience. So you have 700 employees. At the time of the book that you wrote, which we'll talk about in just a moment, you had about 700 employees complete the 5-day training. 4,300 employees complete a 4-hour training. But that is really just a part of the success, because then that group of employees went to submit 2,000 innovations and also saved $15 million within 4 years. That's pretty substantial. So tell me a little bit about how you were able to do that at the Peak Academy.
Number one, I think we all stand on the shoulders of some really great people who created these techniques. And the other thing that I think people should know is I think everyone's really hungry for problem solving techniques, and they're really hungry to find ways to solve these issues that have been driving them nuts for years. And I think all we do as a team is become like the best governmental cheerleaders we possibly can be, which we sort of stand on the side of the room and cheer people on doing really amazing work. People who choose to be in government, choose to work in government, want to help people. That's like their number one goal. Mm-hmm. And what we try to do is get rid of all the things where they're not helping someone. We help them figure out ways to reduce the variation or reduce the waste in any process. And what we're trying to do is get them to do what they love most. Getting a police officer to serve and protect is what he or she wants to do every single day. And if I can reduce 20 minutes out of their laborious report writing process and our team can help them figure that out, then we're opening up an active patrol for 600 to 700 officers on a single day. And that has dramatic impact because that's what they want to do. That's what they chose to be police officers for. And our job is to help them be the best employee they possibly can be.
Yes. I mean, it's hard to argue with what you're trying to accomplish, but in reading some of the things that you wrote about, it doesn't sound like it was an easy path to success.
Well, I think any time that you are selling a product that no one's experienced before, you're going to have a hard time selling it. I mean, it's hard for me to go into an executive and say, oh, follow me, I'll show you how to do this, and we'll be incredible, and we'll get all of your team members working towards the same goal, and they'll be so excited to do it. I think inherently, especially people who work in government, if not anyone in the country, is inherently skeptical of any sort of red bouncy ball management decision or management program. And what we wanted to do was demonstrate our results. And when we first started doing our program, we were being attacked by everyone, high-level employees, line-level employees, mid-level supervisors, but they would find ways that it worked. And every time it worked, we would run around the building screaming how it worked. And then we would show people over and over how it worked. And we would make videos on how it worked. The whole goal was just to get people talking about how, hey, Brian might be crazy. His class might be not what you're used to, but every technique that he's teaching us is working. And we're seeing results. We're seeing more people served in less time with less headaches and better quality. And when you're able to do that, you can have a lasting success. But yeah, I think any time you start something new, people are going to question what you're doing.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we did not mention, and I'll mention it now, is that you were also the author of a book called Peak Performance. And it's about how Denver's Peak Academy saving millions of dollars, boosting morale, changing the world even, and how someone else in government could do the same thing. So tell me, how long has this book been able to be purchased and read?
Well, number one, I really appreciate you pumping up the book. The book's been out since June. We've been working on it for about a year and a half. It's, I think, a great way to talk about what it's like to run an innovation program / process improvement program in a governmental environment and what you have to go through in order to do it. But I also think anyone can pick it up. In fact, there's a restaurant group in Denver that is picking it up right now and asking us to help them with some of their processes where they're greeting their customers coming in and how they're dealing with a stagnation of sort of workforce. They've been really successful as a restaurant group. They have 4 really, really popular restaurants, and they've been really successful for about 15 years, and they're worried that they're stagnating. And so they've asked a couple of us to come in and teach them different techniques on how to solve some problems and get some new innovative ideas going. The real purpose of the book is for anyone to be able to pick it up and use some of the techniques to get out of a logjam or get out of a problem they have.
Well, I read the book as well, and as obviously as a part of preparation for talking with you, but I have to say I really enjoyed the book. I loved your creative chapter titles, from Forget the Fro-Yo to the F word, in this case, the F word being failure. And, some other interesting titles like Screw Buy-In, Now Let's Break All the Rules. And I think what I love about the book is your humble approach about always learning, and how, it's about people. The whole program is really about people, and it's not cookie cutter. And I loved the stories in it, from Penny May at the Department of Denver Human Services and what she went through, and Audrey, this employee that seemed very, very disengaged when in reality she had one of the best ideas ever. So I just loved the book. I really enjoyed it, and I think you guys did a wonderful job of authoring the story of city and county Denver efforts. The question I had was, so what kinds of challenges? I mean, you definitely exposed the opportunities, and even in your foreword, you mentioned, I'm going to get in trouble. Did you actually get into any trouble writing the book?
I would say I get in trouble weekly. And I wouldn't say it's all because of the book. I think part of my, maybe my personality, or part of what we do, is to create disruption in government. And we're creating such disruption sometimes that I can get called on a weekly basis in front of someone to apologize what I did. And I think part of it is having the courage to, give them a hug and walk away and not really worry about it. I think we have caused significant disruption in the organization, and I think every day that we go about what we're trying to do, we need to keep causing it. The last thing that a government ever wants to do is get stuck. And when you're getting overwhelmed by applications for businesses or applications for food stamps or whatever it is, you start to think you can't get out of the hole. And when you feel like that, innovation or process improvement or whatever you want to call it becomes so hard that you can't even see out of your day-to-day business. And if I'm not getting in trouble, I would actually argue I might not be doing my job. Now, my boss might think otherwise, and they probably don't want me to get in trouble. But yeah, I mean, most employees, when they write a book like we wrote, and it has some significant vulnerabilities in there, you typically have to divorce yourself from the city in order to do such a book and to tell people the truth. Our whole theory was, every book has been written about, here's a tool, this is how you use the tool. And our take was, stop doing tool time. Let's talk specifically about how this person went about trying to change their area. And let's talk about the impact that they created from it. And we wanted to take, warts and all, what took place. And that's not easy. And a lot of people in a governmental setting, or even in a large bureaucratic setting, you have legal teams, you have policy teams, you have upper management, you have mid-level management, and we're exposing parts of the city and some of our vulnerabilities.
Yes. And
there are people who don't like that.
Yes. Well, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about what you mean by disruption, because so disruption, what do you mean by that exactly? Because I think in reading your book, you brought people with you. And so the disruption wasn't about, casting people into the fire, if you will, So what do you mean specifically? Right. Like, how do people help us understand what you mean by that? Disruption in what way?
So every time you go to change what has been going on for years and you implement some type of intervention or some type of innovation, it's going to disrupt everyone else's flow. And when you do that, it can have positive and negative effects. Mm-hmm. And you have to be able to adjust whatever intervention or innovation you did or run with it. And when I mean disruption, when we were working in the business license area, at times we had to shut down parts of the group to do trainings and to do innovations. Mm-hmm. And that creates a disruptive force some managers don't want to do, because we're saying, let's get behind even further. Mm-hmm. Because we're going to shut down for a little while and not be able to process these business licenses. And when your average is an hour and a half wait, and now we got to shut down for a little bit, potentially do a 3-hour wait, you're going to anger a lot of people, and you're going to have a backlog that increases. Mm-hmm. That's a massive disruption for an organization and for a customer. Mm-hmm. That's really disruptive for the customer. Yeah. And when we do those things, we have to be cognizant of not only are we creating disruption for our team, but we're also creating disruption for the person we're trying to serve the most.
Mm-hmm. And how did people feel about that? People that were in the process that were going to be working with you to improve those things? Did they feel, was there a lot of resistance initially?
I mean, I think if you gave them all a stone, they would have thrown it right at me. I think there's always, I don't want to say there's always resistance, because the book Switch by Chip and Dan Heath talks about how people change on a daily basis, and you have to really get in line with that. People are logical and emotional, but most decisions are made emotionally. Mm-hmm. And I just love the concept that we all change on a daily basis. One day you don't have kids, and then 9 months later you have a kid. One day you didn't own a home, and then you did a bunch of stuff, and now you own a home. Mm-hmm. And one day you worked in Denver, and 6 months later you're working in Washington, D.C. Those are all choices, and people make those choices, and they do it typically, feet forward. They're pumped. They jump into the world of having kids, and we have to figure out how we get people to jump in feet forward in the world of making change in an organization, so much so that it helps the customer tremendously. Mm-hmm. And that's the hard part. I think the easy part is to say no. We're taught to say no first. That's like our inclination. It's our default switch. Yep. And a lot of us are trying, and we're really struggling teaching people how to say yes if and yes and. In fact, I think there's a whole book about how to say yes as opposed to no.
Yes, getting to yes, I think it's called.
Yeah. And, Nancy Reagan did a really good job in the 80s teaching us all how to say no. Mm-hmm. And that was my really funny joke for the Gen X's of the world. Just say no. But it's true. And I think we jump to no really fast, and we're really reluctant to say yes. Mm-hmm. But I even struggle with it. I'm sure, Tracy, you struggle with it at times when someone comes up with a harebrained idea and it involves a little more work on your side. Uh-huh. You probably say, "Oh no, I'm not doing that." I say it all the time.
Yeah, actually, my problem is I say yes too much. I need to work on no more.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Right. Or yes and. I really like what you said, the genius of the and. And, I've been spending a lot of time working in King County, which is in the Seattle area in Washington. And it's those interesting questions.
If you clean your room for 7 months in a row.
Uh-huh. Say that again. I'm sorry.
I said you can have that beautiful sweatshirt if you clean your room every day for 7 months. Uh-huh. That's a great yes if.
Yes, exactly. So, there were some really great stories in the book, and I probably, if I had to ask you to pick one or two of your favorites, I don't know if you have one or two favorites that you really enjoyed writing about. Do you?
Yeah, I absolutely have favorites, but don't tell the person who I favor, because that's like your kids knowing who you favor, and I think that's inappropriate to be a good parent.
Okay, well,
however,
I'll tell you what my favorites were. How's that?
Oh yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Then I don't feel awkward.
Right. Well, I mentioned your whole title, Forget the Froyo. And I loved hearing about that, and I was excited to read about it. And it was the Excise and License Department having to wait 3 to 8 hours. And part of that solution was they decided to install a froyo machine in the waiting room so that as people waited, they could get frozen yogurt. And I think that is so funny. And I think just hearing it and reading about it is interesting. And thanks for sharing that. I think it's pretty incredible that you finally said, well, how about if we improve the process?
Well, I mean, who complains when you get free yogurt? I mean, let's be honest. No one is mad about getting free yogurt, especially if you bring your kids in.
Oh, right.
The problem is, after 3 hours, how much yogurt can you consume where you're not pissed anymore?
Yes.
So we worked with that team a lot. They did such a spectacular job, and the manager in that area, Stacy Laux, she's actually highlighted in our book, and then she's highlighted in another book that's coming out this summer by a couple of professors from Valparaiso University, and they were just blown away that this seemingly pretty simple situation had turned into such a cluster, and yet this manager and this team were just able to crush it and to really focus on reducing the wait times of their customer, to measure it. They've done such a great job, Tracy, that this team has not requested additional funding in 2 years.
Wow.
And an organization like the business licensing area, who handles the business licenses for marijuana, they have not requested additional resources. And to me, that's really mind-blowing.
Yes.
And we've had an increase, not because of marijuana, I want to make sure that this is clear, but we've had an increase because of how much Denver is growing. They used to do about 26,000 transactions a year. They're doing about 32,000 transactions a year now. Mm-hmm. And that is because of the large expansions that are going on in Denver. And they've been able to handle it without increasing staff, without increasing technology. They've been really, really, really strong. There's actually a great video on our website. If you go to denvergov.org/Peak Academy, there's a wonderful video about this team there on business licenses, and I think the world of them. They are one of my favorites, so I have to be a little careful because I actually use them in almost every speech I give. So I'm glad that you liked them as much as I do.
Yes.
I would say that the thing that blew me away the most and the innovation that I talk about the most is probably the simplest innovation that we have in the book, and that's Chris Tubbs. And Chris Tubbs' team used to receive a 500-page report from a vendor every single day, and his team would print out that report only to use the last 6 pages. And they came up with a process improvement to inform the vendor to only send us those 6 pages. And that single innovation saves the city around $5,000 in paper costs a year. Mm-hmm. And I was explaining this to a group of people that I hang out with. Apparently, I shouldn't hang out with them anymore. And they literally said, only in government would you think that's the coolest innovation. And only in government would you reward them for doing it. Mm-hmm. And I always respond with, there's 2 ways to respond to every innovation. Mm-hmm. You can respond by saying, you should have done that 20 years ago. Or you can respond with, Chris, that is the coolest thing I've ever heard. Yeah. Here's a $5 gift card to Starbucks, and tell your team how proud we are. And if you do the latter as opposed to the former, you'll get a lot more results on small innovations than those big innovations that you're trying to put in place, those huge process improvements that everyone's dying to put in place. They're a lot easier when you handle the small ones first.
Yes.
And Chris's team is just, they never continue they always continue to surprise me, and just absolutely blown away by his group.
Well, I really appreciate you coming and talking with us about the Peak Academy, about your book, and I can't believe we're out of time already. It went so fast. We could talk for an hour and have still a lot to talk about. So I just wanted to say thanks for joining us today, Brian. Is there anything else you want to mention about the book or about the Peak Academy before we end up having to finish our coffee?
No, the coffee was delicious. I'm more of an Americano guy, so I was a little mad when they only had drip, but we made it through. The last thing I would say is if you're interested in what we did in Denver and you want to read about it, if you go to denverpeak.com, you can pick up a book there, or you can pick up one on Amazon by searching my last name, or my first and last name is Brian Elms. And if you find us, tell us what you think about the book on Amazon, and do a quick book review. That would be awesome. And
Great.
Thank you so much for your time. This was really cool. I hope I get to hang out with a lot of people who listen to it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking that time to have that coffee with us. And thanks for spreading the word on the good work in government. I think with things happening and the elections, that are going on, I think it's always nice to hear some really good stuff happening in government. And I think you'll start to change the way people think about government, hopefully. So that was Brian Elms, director of the Peak Academy at the City and County of Denver. Thanks for joining us, Brian. And I also want to thank our audience for joining us as well. We'll see you next time at the cafe.
So that wraps us up for our episode of Just in Time Cafe. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to download the podcast on iTunes, and also check our website for any upcoming webinars.
Thank you, everybody. Go drink some coffee. Meet us again in a month.
See you next time.
Thank you for joining us for Just in Time Cafe. Visit golean6sigma.com/podcast to share your feedback or listen to more podcasts. Also, please subscribe to Just in Time Cafe on iTunes.